Some people, it's just either yes to Jesus or no to Jesus, but there's a lot of kind of, I would call them just kind of incomplete, made-up versions of Jesus. So it's very popular. Sometimes you'll talk to people and say, well, I think Jesus was important because he was a political revolutionary. He really rose up against, he's kind of a working class guy that stood up to the authorities. And I like to think of Jesus as that kind of cultural architect. Others say, well, he's a pretty influential rabbi. He taught a lot of good ethics. A lot of the slogans, turn the other cheek. A lot of us say that. I think Jesus was a very good teacher. And other people would say, well, he was a man like us, but he had a special connection to God. He was an especially holy man, but nothing more. Just God kind of worked through that particular man in a way that he hasn't worked through other men. See, all these views, maybe some elements in truth in each of them, but all those views are an incomplete, inadequate view of Jesus. You see, the disciples here, they failed to see Jesus for who he really is. And I think it's safe to say that when we don't see Jesus for who he really is, that we continue to harbor a kind of socially acceptable view of Jesus as just being an interesting guy from history, then I think we have every reason to be afraid. We have every reason to be afraid because what we've done, we said, you know what, God, I know what you say about my condition, and I know that what you say about the provision that you've given us in the person of Jesus, but I'm going to say no thanks to all that. I prefer to just say Jesus is kind of an interesting guy, and you know what? I'll trust my own mind and my own devices and my own record and my own merit, and so I go say that's a very terrifying place to be. The disciples are fearful because they have here an inadequate, incomplete view of Jesus, and that leads to their fear. And so who really is Jesus? He tells us by what he does here. Jesus' response in all this is a claim to who he really is. They're 3.5 to 4 miles in the middle of the Sea of Galilee. They're experienced boatsmen, experienced fishermen. They know what they saw, and he tells us twice that Jesus was walking on the water. And we enlightened folks, as people of science, we say, well, that's impossible. And I would say that's precisely the point. That is precisely the point. Only God can walk on water. There's only 2 people in the history of recorded history who've walked in water, Jesus and Peter for a moment by the grace of Jesus, only those 2. So if you walk and say, well, I can't believe this. No person who understands modern science would ever believe that a man could walk on water. Yes, that's right. So do you believe, though, that the God who created everything can trample the waves of the sea and manipulate the natural universe because he spoke it into existence? Now, none of us, when we come into a room and somebody says, who's there? We don't say, it is I. That sounds like overly formal or arrogant. But Matthew records this for a reason, is that the construction that what Jesus says here are the words, I am. In other words, it'd be just as acceptable to translate this phrase, take heart, I am, don't be afraid. Now, why is that important? Because 1,300 years prior to this night, about 1,300 years, in the life and ministry of Moses, you remember God chose Moses to lead the Israelites out of Egypt. And Moses, doubting his own abilities, said, Lord, how in the world am I going to get these people to follow me because I'm just me? And this is what happens. And God said to Moses, I am who I am. And he said, say this to the people of Israel, I am has sent me to you. In other words, the same revealed name of God, right? God says, this is what I'm to be called. This is how you know that I'm the true God because my name is I am is exactly what Jesus says in this circumstance. So you think all these Jewish guys on a boat, they hear, I am. They're thinking that is none other than God himself. Now you have Jesus on the sea. He's walking on the water, and he tells these guys, I am. Don't be afraid. So what's the true identity of Jesus? Political revolutionary? Class, kind of in the class warfare? It's like influential rabbi? Interesting man of history that made a little impact? I say Matthew and the others in this boat are telling us that the man Jesus, right, that He's the God of the universe. He made everything, and he walked on the sea. And the reason we can trust him with our fears in our lives is because ultimately, not only is he the one who made us, but he's the one to whom we'll give an account. I would ask you, are you a tired rower? Are you a weary rower? That you're out kind of in the middle of the sea and you're thinking, I'm working really hard here and I'm getting nowhere and I'm a long way from anything I could call security and I feel opposed and beaten down, and quite frankly, it is honestly intimidating to think that all that I have is me. And if you feel that way today, I pray that you'd surrender to the Lord Jesus and say, Lord, save me. See verse 32 there. We need Jesus in our boat. He gets in the boat. The storm, we're told, doesn't go away, but there's a calm. Sometimes they say, when Jesus is in the boat, I still face the tempests of life, but there's a calm and there's a peace, and we all need that, right? And he's there to hear us. 2 times in this verse, the word immediately is used. Look at verse 27, right? Jesus responds with his voice immediately. It's I, don't be afraid. And when Peter sings verse 31, he says, Lord, save me. Immediately, Jesus reaches out his hand. We've sunk ourselves, focusing on our own fears, and he reaches out his hand. He says, don't be afraid. I'm in control.